Journeys Ahead, Chapter 3, Who I Am. With a sharp sting of light, Jida and Nock watched in stunned curiosity as Void sealed the portal close. The contraption upon his arm then slowly retracted before he himself stumbled to a knee. Reacting quickly, Jida ran the Void's side and held him up before he crashed to the ground. Wincing, she grunted and gasped to the spark's weight, completely forgetting that his body was mostly made of metal. Jeez, for someone with such a slim build, you're pretty freaking heavy. Jida grunted as Nock went to aid the spark as well. Sorry, got a bit of pasta in my system, I guess. Void joked as he awkwardly stood to his feet, grasping his stomach. This is a workshop, right? The spark then asked, eyeing Nock, who stood below. Yes, sir, the small mechanic replied sharply. Could you two maybe get me to a work area? I need a place to repair myself. Void quietly asked, sounding exhausted. Nodding, both Jida and Nock began to escort the spark towards the garage, worried that his injuries may have been more lethal than he initially let on. Together, the three of them slowly lumbered their way forwards, all tired and curious. So, are you completely a robot, or... Jida questioned as they walked through the torn open door of the break room. More of a cyborg, really, Void answered with a wrecked tone. My head is all flesh and bone, but my body is entirely robotic. You see, my soul energy transfers itself into its servos, creating an artificial set of nerves and organs. But I won't get into that. The spark explained as he was gently settled upon a workbench. That is fine by me, Jida replied, making a queasy-looking face. Do you need anything? Tools? A drink? Band-aids? Welding parts? Anything? Nock asked, adjusting his glasses. Some basic tools will do, thank you. Void replied, giving a small smile towards the two before him, as they stared back, still in awe as to who he was. For a good while, Void sat upon the bench, slowly but surely repairing his build. With his right leg up and crossed over his left knee, he slowly screwed in a few small bolts into his ankle. As the spark did so, he just so happened to glance upwards, seeing Jida on the other side of the room. Her white eyes were fixed upon him as she stood at her own table. She had been working away upon an instrument since Void had been settled. However, when she noticed that the spark had caught her stare, she quickly looked back down and, supposedly, went back to work on her own little issue. It's rude to stare, Void said, placing both his feet back upon the ground and his hands upon the bench seat. Wincing with an awkward but bashful smile, Jida slowly looked up to meet the spark's gaze, with apologetic eyes. Sorry, You're actually from another dimension? Jida asked, still in a disbelief state. I speak no lies. Void returned with a gentle smile. Slowly standing, the spark cringed as he adjusted to his repairs. It always hurt the first few hours with new parts, but he had dealt with worse. So much worse. Should you be... Jida stuttered with a flinch. From this quick and sudden movement, Jida accidentally plucked, or rather tore away the newly applied string out of the guitar. Her hand had been wrapped around their small forms, and the quick jitter in her arms had caused them to come right back out. God damn it. She bluntly cursed, looking back down to her instrument. Raising an eyebrow, Void quietly approached the musician, curious as to what exactly the instrument's condition was, for he had only caught a glimpse of it earlier. Something wrong? He asked, rounding the work table and narrowing his gaze upon the guitar. Turning her head, Jida awkwardly shuffled aside to let the spark stand beside her, noticing that he wanted to see the issue. It's my guitar. Its strings have been very faulty as of late. They won't stop breaking because of how hot my fingers get. Jida explained by raising her hands up, looking to be asking for a double high five. However, she showed off her soft warm hues in her 8 digits. Raising his hand, Void scratched the lower half of his spherical head, looming between Jida's fingers and the guitar. I see. You a guitarist? He gently asked, while solely focusing upon the instrument. I mean, yeah. Well, I'm trying. Jida replied the void as he leaned over the instrument. Without saying a word or any sense of warning, Void reached his hands out and took hold of the guitar's remaining strings. Then, with one pull, yanked them all out with a loud snap. Whoa, wait, dude, why did you do that? Jida gasped, raising both her hands in shock. Eyeing and evaluating the strings in his curved hands, Void tapped his foot and shifted his mouth to the side, trying to think. Void, why did you do that? Jida demanded to know. With a quick snap, Void deployed his battle mask and used its visor to scan the strings, curious as to what extent the damage could have been, and how much pressure regular string could hold to withstand Jida's abilities. Yeah, those are the burns of cosmic fire, alright. Void said before turning back to the guitar. Cosmic fire? Jida asked as Void's hands converted into what almost looked to be faucets. Hey, what are you... Before she could finish, Jida watched as Void began to weld out some sort of strand of energy from the faucet tips. Void then slowly began crafting a new set of strings for her guitar. Like a spider weaving a web, one strand passed over the other, until at last, finishing off with a newly branded set of rubbery, glowing strings. 5 in total that cooled off within moments. Retracting his strange sync-looking devices as well as his mask, Void turned and nodded to Jida before stepping back and gesturing towards her instrument. Alright, that should do it. Void stated, eyeing Jida with a cheerful expression. What did... Reaching out, Jida gently plucked at one of the now cooled off strings. As she strummed, the familiar sensation of her energy flicked upon its form. However, instead of frying or breaking apart like always, the newly welded string reacted to her touch. From the sensation of her energy, the string created a small sound, whilst lighting up into a soft yellow glow. Eyes widening and jaw slightly dropping, Jida looked from her guitar and then the Void, and then back. Come on, try her out. Void said whilst crossing his arms, having an almost cocky grin upon his face. Without hesitation, Jida reached out and held her signature instrument. Pulling a pick from her pocket, she looked the Void again once more, before strumming both it and her fingertips upon the string. Escaping out came a beautiful set of notes that embraced both Jida's and Void's ears. To accompany the noise, the astonishing glow of yellow illuminated to life upon the reformatted strings, leaving Jida speechless with a smile. You fixed it, she said, plucking away, feeling that these sets of wires wouldn't break upon touch. How did you... Like I said, I travel the multiverse. I have a lot of otherworldly tricks up my sleeve. Void said with a shrug pose, whilst turning his upper half around in a 360 spin. Wow, I thank you, Jida remarked in a sense of gratitude whilst hooking the instrument upon her back. You helped me out. It's the least I could do to repay you. Plus, you seem to be pretty good at it. Void complimented, placing both his hands upon his hips, listening in to the music she was playing. Gently blushing, Jida smiled and moved her bangs away from her eyes, feeling a sense of compassion from the otherworldly being before her. Hey, I'm getting a little hungry. You want to get something to eat? Surely you must be hungry after all that. That is, if you actually eat. Jida asked, looking upon the spark's metal body. Tilting his head, Void bit the interior of his mouth to the question. The spark replied before opening his palm and looking at the multiverse map, seeing that there were no alerts or issues to be seen at the moment. Sure. Yeah, I got time. Void answered whilst rubbing the back of his head. You sure? You look uncertain. Jida asked, curious to the spark's behavior. Gazing upon her, Void simply shrugged before replying, No. It's just been a long time since I've been out. Void replied, raising an eyebrow, unsure of how to explain his situation per se. It had been many years since he was invited to something, let alone having an interaction with another soul go this far. So to say he wasn't sure on how to respond would be an understatement. Oh, well, we don't need to go to public places if that makes you nervous. I know a spot, Jida said whilst pulling her cloak out of the guitar. Looking from her and then to his hands, Void thought to himself for a moment, knowing that it wasn't being around public that made him uneasy. Rather, it was something deeper, more cut and dry. It was the prospect of doing something with another soul that didn't involve traveling and destroying monsters. To do something normal wasn't something Void had done for a very long time. Not since the fall of his people. Since he was a boy. Void then looked back up, seeing that Jida had already cloaked herself, looking ready to go. Did he want to do this? With something in the way? Did he have the courage to try and do something fun? Well, is it a yes or no, Blue Eyes? Jida asked, saying the strange nickname yet again. Blue Eyes, Void repeated to himself. After a small moment of thought, Void gently smirked to the phantom, the only response Jida needed to hear. Come on, Blue Eyes, try to keep up, Jida exclaimed with a chuckle as she warped across a gap between rooftops. Following behind, Void kept his eyes forward but refused to look down. Taking a hard leap, he crossed the gap and landed to the next roof ahead, grunting whilst trying to maintain pace. You know you can just call me Void, right? The Spark insisted as the two ran about 5 feet apart from one another, Jida in the front and Void in the back. Don't like the nickname? Jida asked as she turned around to face Void, whilst warping to the next building ahead. Following close, Void leapt another gap, all the while eyeing down his cloaked ally, her friend. He wasn't sure what to call her as of yet. Never had one. I guess I'm just not used to it. Void returned as the two of them jumped again, however, now sliding down a sloped roof to a lower segment of buildings. What? No one has ever called you something other than Void? Jida asked with wide eyes as they descended. Void merely shrugged with a half smile in response. Alright then, how about V? Jida suggested while smirking beneath the hood. Wincing, Void slowly shook his head before the two leapt down upon the roof of a moving train below. No. Let's just stick with Void, the Spark suggested as he found his footing upon the moving vehicle. Slightly chuckling, Jida looked on ahead, watching as buildings and streets whizzed by. The train they sat upon had been stationed on an elevated rail, above most of the city, moving at a fairly tame speed that wasn't too slow nor fast. Alright then, Blue Eyes. Just follow my lead, Jida stated before grabbing Void by the arm and leaping off the train. I literally just said to call me. Whoa, wait! Falling downwards, the two entered a free fall towards the street below. In reaction, Void shouted as his fear of heights kicked him in the gut tenfold. Meanwhile, Jida maintained focus and warped the two of them away before they hit the ground. Teleporting towards the next set of buildings to their left, both Jida and Void re-emerged back into the dim moonlight. Jida tripped and slightly stumbled upon exit, while Void simply crashed and rolled across the roof. Quickly whirling back around, Jida approached Void, who was now getting back to his feet. Oh, jeez, I'm sorry. Are you okay? She asked as Void stood up and brushed himself off. Don't do that again, please. Heights are not my thing, the Spark replied whilst looking up towards the hooded musician. Wait, you don't like heights? You're a multiversal traveler and you don't like heights? Jida asked, beginning to trek forward again. We all have fears, you know, even the most powerful of us, Void replied as he now ran alongside her. I mean, you do got a point there. Also, if it's alright, could you tell me what the multiverse is like? Jida asked as the two leapt and flipped over vent shafts and rotary fans upon the building's roof. What do you mean by that? Void questioned as he leapt forward and extending his right arm at an unnatural length. Using it, he clenched upon a not too far off crane and swung forward a massive gap, whilst Jida merely warped as always. Like, how does it work? Is it like a Marvel thing, a DC thing? Wait, does that mean there's multiple versions of me? Jida began to ramble as the infinite ideas of the multiverse began to race across her mind. It's all above, actually. Void answered, landing to the ground alongside Jida. The multiverse is an endless sea of possibilities. Anything you can imagine is there. Even the tiniest minute detail exists and or works in some capacity. Turning her head with a raised eyebrow, Jida couldn't help but gaze upon the spark in a curious nature. Whoa, okay. But like, what's the science behind it? How does it all connect? What binds everything together, you know? She asked as the two took another leap. Good question, Void answered with a smirk. To tell you the truth, I don't exactly know myself. I've come to learn that if you go beyond a certain point, the whole thing changes its own logic. Then again, the two of them found themselves entering a more quiet sector of the city, nearing a water's edge that overlooked the west side. This was the more fancy side of the city. What does that mean? Jida pondered before Void turned to face her. The best way I can describe it is that if you go beyond a certain veil, the way everything connects and works seems to retcon itself. Pathways change and the whole layout is just different. It could become one straight line or a mess of clouds and dust. If I'm being honest, we're really talking about an omniverse more than anything else. Void affirmed as the two of them slid to a stop and decided to overlook the grand city. First dimensions, multiverse, and now omniverse? What are you going to drop on me next? The infinite verse? The extendoverse? Jida retorted in an unbelieved state, joking about what other terms could use to describe the ever-expanding world of realities. I've been to a world where there was flying whales, if that scratches your itch. Void revealed, side-smirking Jida. Okay. You know what? Let's save the talk for just a few more minutes. There's a really good pizza shop about a block down. If you want, you can wait here and I can get us some slices. Jida asked, pulling her hood off to reveal her normal self back to the light. If you insist. Void returned, taking a seat upon the ledge of the building. Nodding, Jida stood upon that same ledge, back face towards the city. I'll be back in a flash, she said with a wink. And a 1, and a 2, and a blah, 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 blah. Falling backwards off the ledge, Void nearly shouted her name before she warped away, leaving him alone to look out over the strange city. I'm not going to get used to that, he said to himself, now alone. As he sat, Void couldn't help but let his thoughts consume him. This was weird, he told himself. The last time he had gone out to do something similar had been when he was around 9 or 10. It almost felt taboo, to say the least. Taboo to be doing something normal. With anxiety growing in his head, Void quickly raised his hand and checked the multiversal map. To his relief, there were no warnings of rifts or attacks to be seen, at least for now. Sighing, he closed his palm and gently tapped the top of his knee with the underside of said palm. Looking back up, he gazed over the city of Aurora. Its gleaming yellow light seemed to blink like eyes in his direction. All the while, he couldn't help but blink back. Beautiful, he mumbled, placing both his hands upon the roof. The multiverse is beautiful, was what he forgot to tell Jida in the moment. And then boom! Explosions! Terror! They were like, this is the end for you, Phantom. And I was like, nuh-uh. And then I went blam, blam, blam. Next thing you know, more explosions. They all went screaming and running. Eating a slice of pizza, Void listened to Jida as she rambled on about one of her previous adventures, as she seemed to like to call it. The two sat side by side as she talked, and Void couldn't help but notice just how expressive and lively she was. Waving her arms, throwing her head back with smiles and laughter. It was strange, to say the least. After years of ridicule and fear from being an otherworldly being, the spark couldn't help but appreciate Jaida's nature towards him. There weren't many like her, and it was a nice change of pace. That sounds both exciting yet extremely irresponsible. But I can dig the vision. Void complimented the orange-haired guitarist, who solemnly smiled with appreciation. I try my best, Jaida said, striking a hero pose with a smirk. Placing both fists upon her hips, she jokingly looked out over the city, before ultimately cracking herself up after trying to hold it in. Void couldn't help but smile and shake his head to this. What a weirdo, he thought. A good kind of weirdo. That's when he noticed something. As Void looked upon Jaida, he saw a fairly large scraped open gash upon her left shoulder. She had taken off her cloak by this point, and her sweater was still tied promptly around her waist. If she hadn't been wearing a tank top, he wouldn't have noticed it. Hey, you do realize you're cut open pretty bad, right? Void asked with slight worry as he gestured towards the wound. Blinking in response, Jaida slowly moved her shoulder towards her sight, only to see what Void had been referring to. Oh, yeah, that. I'm fine. I just cut it earlier after trying to stop a robbery. I'm okay though, seriously. Jaida said, trying to brush off the wound, however, feeling the pain ever present. Here, let me see it. Void asked as he placed his pizza slice down, nudging his way towards Jaida. Void, I'm fine. Seriously, it's nothing major. The musician returned, eyeing the spark as he neared. Now being less than a foot away, Void slowly rose his hands and, without saying a word, gestured for Jaida to raise her arm. Locking eyes with the spark, she could see the tenderness within. He looked genuinely concerned for her well-being. She wasn't sure if he was just purely that nice, or if things were different from wherever he came from. There was still so much she wanted to ask and know, but perhaps in this moment, she learned that Void was a little bit more than just a fighter. He seemed to truly be a helping hand. At least, that's what it seemed. Silently, Jaida raised her arm towards the spark, in which Void gently held. Examining the wound, he squinted his eyes before raising his right hand up, and then softly clasped it around the gash. Void held firm, and then began the healing process. In reaction, Jaida flinched to the sudden pressure, leading the Void to quickly let go. Sorry, are you alright? He asked with a slightly panicked face. Yeah, just wasn't expecting to feel something freezing. What are you doing exactly? Jaida asked before raising her arm again. I'm sealing your wound. Sorry for... It's just hard to socialize and express these things sometimes. Void said, gently wrapping his hand around Jaida's wound once more. I see. Does your world communicate differently? Jaida softly asked as a cold sensation tickled her arm. This time, more gradual than instant. For a moment, Void fell still and noticeably quiet. Even Jaida had caught it for the short few seconds of when it happened. The spark seemed to stare blankly downwards, lost in some kind of thought, until he quietly looked back up with a blink. Yeah. He replied with a dry tone before releasing his hand. The wound had now been seemingly frozen shut. The gash had been cleaned and crystallized by a green gel-like substance that hardened within the air. Now opening his left arm hatch, Void took hold of a set of bandages that were stored inside. Looking upon it, Jaida could see that the spark's left arm seemed to be some kind of makeshift toolbox. Parts were lined within, as well as some random trinkets of old photos. With a solid strand of bandage wrapping now pulled out, Void proceeded to place it over the wound and wrap a few layers around and around, till at last, tightening its hold. Gently patting it down, he slowly nodded before asking, You said you were still learning your powers, but I gotta ask. Looking up, Void met Jaida's white glowing gaze. How did you get your powers? Reaching up, Jaida caressed her bandage wound before looking back to Void. Flashes of her past then ran through her eyes like a firework, images she didn't want to recall, yet remained. Slowly turning away, Jida looked up and out towards the much nicer side of the city, a less crime-populated sector, yet the most greedy. Slowly kicking her legs and holding both her hands, Jida looked to the streets below and released a small sigh. You know, I've only told one other person in my life about that. Jida mentioned, eyes trained upon the road. If you wish to not speak on it, you don't have to. Void then said, seeing a sense of sadness behind Jida's eyes. No, I mean, like, it's not every day an interdimensional traveler asks you your origin story, you know? Jida said with a small chuckle, before turning her gaze back upon the spark. Plus, you seem like a trustworthy guy. She then stated, before caressing her patched wound, smiling gently. You asked earlier I don't reveal your identity. Whatever you tell me now will stay between us. Void assured as he looked out over the Golden City. Nodding, Jida faced the same direction, and then began her story. It happened almost 10 years ago now, times before things weren't as damp and muddy. Jida began, now reminiscing upon her childhood. It was me, my mother, father, and baby brother. We used to live on that side of the city. Jida then pointed towards the grand city of Aurora before them. We were happy and had all we could ask for. A home, a good meal, and, of course, a sense of belonging. Jida explained, smiling as flashes of good memories caressed her like an angel's hug. Playing the guitar with her father, tending to her little brother, and watching movies with her mother. The best of times, one she wished to return to. That wasn't until one night where everything changed. Looking to the side, Void watched as Jida slowly hung her head low and began to almost be picking away at her fingernails, no longer smiling. A night came where it was projected that a beautiful meteor shower would fall above Aurora. It was expected to be a once-in-a-lifetime sight, and I wanted us to go and see it. Jida's eyes then furrowed down into what Void recognized to be regret. Raising his hands, he gently settled his head upon them, whilst looking and listening to the musician. We found a spot, a watch site within the city. Everyone seemed to be there, all excited for the showers. I especially was the most excited out of all of them. I stood, I jumped, and I cheered when the first sight of glimmering yellow entered the atmosphere. Then one by one, more came down and soared ahead. When I tell you it was the most beautiful sight, nothing would have compared, if it weren't for what happened moments after. Slowly reaching up, Jida gently held the crystallized guitar pick with her hand before taking a deep breath and continuing on. The next thing we all knew was that something went wrong. Someone had predicted the shower length to be further off from our atmosphere, when in actuality, it was at gravity's length. Before we all knew it, Aurora was being struck left and right by the fires of space. Jida revealed, closing her eyes as tears began to weld. The asteroids and comets struck down upon my home. Buildings were decimated, streets and shops were ignited to flame. So many lives were lost. My family and I, we ran for cover amidst the downpour. I remember seeing flashes of white and orange over and over. Sparks and stardust entered my lungs as we ran as hard as we could for shelter. It was then I heard a loud roaring from behind, and as I turned to face death, I felt the sensation of my father pushing me away from him, my mother, and my baby brother. I only turned to catch one last glimpse of their eyes before a bright light took hold, then darkness. Staring on in a disheartened gaze, Void tried to find his words, but wasn't sure on what to say. All he could do was give a caring stare, whilst a tear trickled down Jida's cheek. I then awoke in a hospital to the most numbing and stinging pain I've ever felt. My once ruby red skin had turned into this brown, ashy stone color, and my glistening white hair had become the fiery orange you see now. Jida said, looking the void whilst wiping away her tears. Nock and his family found me, saved me. But as for my family, they perished pushing me away from danger. I was the only survivor of a close encounter strike, and my body showed. Jida said, reading her name upon the back of her father's guitar pick. Everything I knew, my family, my home, all of it was lost that night. Everyone who survived refers to it as the Night of 1,000 Flames. Jida finished as she looked upon Void, her once carefree attitude shattered to reveal the scars beneath. I am terribly sorry for your loss. Void remorsed as he gazed down in respect. Thank you. Anyways, the doctors couldn't explain my sudden change in appearance. They ran tests and all came back negative. No illness, no change in soul. I was simply diagnosed as normal and safe to go about my life. But nothing has been normal since that night. Jida continued, narrowing her gaze downwards, twirling the guitar pick between her fingers. As other kids became teenagers and grew to experience things normally in life, I was dealing with coping and loss, whilst also discovering things about myself. Strange things. You see, 5 years later, when I turned 15, I began to develop some abilities. Jida explained before warping to the left side of Void, still sitting and looking out over the city. In moments of anger, I found that my skin would light up, my hair would glow, and my hands would get very, very hot. It was scary. The only one I told this to was Nock, the musician recalled as she summoned energy to her fingertips. In moments of panic, I discovered that I could also teleport, or as I like to call it, warping. Raising an eyebrow, Void tilted his head before asking, Warping? Why not just call it teleporting? He asked. I think it just rolls off the tongue better. Jida returned, facing Void. Like, here, say it slowly with me. Warping, she asked, leaning in towards Void. Warping, Void replied. There you go. Warping. Say it again. Warping. Warping. Void said, trying not to laugh. See? Sounds more fun, right? Jida said, mustering a smile. Yeah, I guess you're right. Void returned with a small smile. Anyways, after learning that I had powers, I decided to take the opportunity and become the plan was to become a hero for the people, but everyone in the city seems to hate me. Jida revealed, looking down with a sigh. You see, after the Night of 1,000 Flames, the city of Aurora became bitter. Crime is at an all-time high now. People are dying on the streets. It's as though the loss festered into the soul of this once grand utopia. So, with the powers that night gave me, I decided that I wanted to make use of the bad and try and turn it for good. I want to make it up for everyone that was lost, to make things right, you know? It's as though I have a responsibility. Void asked, cutting Jida off before she said it herself. Yeah, that's exactly what it's like, she said, gazing back out over the city. This mindset you follow, this need to make things right. I know it well. Void stated before gazing back out over the city as well. To make up for what went wrong, to honor those that have been lost. I understand fully. For a long moment, Jida said no words. She simply just nodded and stared. That was before she turned and gazed at the spark. If you don't mind me asking, What's your story, Void? Why are you hopping realities, fighting those monsters? That is, if it's okay with you. Jida asked, turning to face the spark. She now sat upon the ledge, with her arms wrapped around her knees, and head keen forward in curiosity. You told me your story. You deserve to hear mine, Void replied, taking a deep breath. Like you, my story began when I was only a small boy, Void revealed. I was 10 and lived with my mother and father. You see, my home dimension resided in an almost sub-pocket within the multiverse, a place where it didn't conform to the laws of reality. In a way, it was sort of a linchpin between worlds, if I'm remembering correctly. Void explained, making hand gestures. Me and my people called it Salvuheim, Void expressed, smiling towards Jida. Salvuheim? That's a pretty name. The musician responded with a tilt in her head. Oh, it was beautiful. So very beautiful. Starry skies, large plants, and a kind and loving community. Me and my people, we called ourselves Sparks. Void continued. I grew up with wealth, love, and so many friends. To tell you the truth, I was a pretty greedy kid. I wasn't kind, actually. I was kind of a dick. Void said, shaking his head with a soft chuckle. You don't strike me as such, my dear friend. Jida replied, raising an eyebrow with a tiny, confused smile. Narrowing his gaze, Void shrugged before continuing on. Well, you'll see why here in a minute. Being honest, I thought I had everything I needed in life, and I took it for granted. You just never know how vulnerable you are until something rips it away, Void said, his voice softening into a dour, low state. One night, something happened that none of us could have predicted. From the skies above, we all heard a loud crack. Everyone in the world awoke and ran outside to see this massive tear above us all. Void said, looking upwards, remembering what had transpired upon that night. The tear in the sky. I didn't know what it was then, but now I do. You see, it was a glitch portal, and before we knew it, our home was under attack by the monsters that poured out of its crevices. Eyes widening, Jida gently clasped her hand over her mouth before muttering a soft, "Oh my god." The monsters of the night attacked and ravaged my world. The glitch came in all forms, large, small, polychromes, mimics, and several others that you haven't seen yet. They destroyed and took everything. Void sadly explained with a face that looked soulless to Jida. It was the expression of someone who had lost so much. My parents, bless their souls, braved forward and took me to a safe place. You see, we Sparks had the technology to hop between worlds. We crafted our mechanical bodies, as well as other systems for world transport. And through what remained of our wrecked devices that still functioned, one travel station remained, and my parents sent me through as a last-ditch effort to protect me. Void revealed, holding back tears. After that night, I found myself alone wherever I went. I tried asking for help, but I was shunned and feared by the inhabitants of every reality I followed. Not only was I alone, I was scared and helpless. Lowering her hands, Jida gazed upon the spark, seeing the pain behind his eyes, the sorrow she knew all too well. Void, she softly stated. Then, one day, when I was scavenging for food from a damn dumpster of all things, another portal opened. This one was small upon a brick wall, kind of like the one in Nox's bathroom, and from it came another set of monsters that quickly assaulted the world's inhabitants. There were 3 in total, if I recall correctly. Looking down, Void clenched his fists before releasing an angered huff. Something within me changed when I saw it transpire. A burning sensation of rage and anger as I watched the same creatures attack the innocent bystanders. In that moment, I acted upon instinct. With my bare hands, I fought the glitched. I was severely injured, but I came out on top. After their defeat, I threw them back from whence they came, and watched as the portals sealed themselves inside. From that day forward, I vowed to find and put an end to their terror. Void remarked, looking back to Jida with tiny tears billowing around his oval eyes. For the past 10 years, I've followed their every whim, jumping between realities, fending them off just to prevent another world from meeting the same fate as mine. Void remarked as Jida began to slightly tear up for the spark, understanding where he was coming from, that sense of responsibility that she knew all too well. So, you're doing this out of revenge? She asked. Truthfully, it did start as such. I was angry, vengeful even. But after the first few months, that sense of revenge slowly turned from rage to a sense of responsibility. You see, my people once had a saying, Void revealed as he placed his hand upon the blue-arrowed crest upon his chest. For those we lost, and for those we honor. He stated, as he and Jida locked eyes once again. I don't just fight these things to avenge my people. I fight to prevent the same fate from happening to other worlds. I'm not always successful, but I will not rest until I find a way to stop this. Jida was at a loss for words. She wasn't sure how to react or how to respond. It was a tale of both loss but respect. It all made sense then. His hesitancy, his worry. Void didn't just lose everything. He grew up way too quickly. It was heartbreaking for her. There are no words that can convey just how... Oh, Void, I'm so sorry. Jida remorsed as she inched her way closer to the spark. What the hell are the glitched? Why are they attacking realities? Jida then asked, tempted to place a hand upon Void's shoulder. Why are you doing this alone? Sighing, Void tapped his knees before continuing on. Think about this. What happens when something plays out wrong in a universe? That being in a way that doesn't destroy it. Void asked, taking hold of this slice of pizza. What if an event happens that wasn't meant to happen? Something small like making a right turn instead of a left, or eating the pepperoni slice of pizza instead of the sausage slice. Void explained while taking a bite out of the pizza he had, which indeed had sausage on it. You know, small errors that don't change the course of fate and destiny per se. Void continued as Jida listened in. These small changes don't affect the world or reality itself, but what if those small mistakes led to massive consequences? You see, these tiny and seemingly innocent errors in the multiverse are the cause and key points in creating the beings you've heard me call the glitched. Slowly nodding, Jida leaned in as Void continued his explanation. Through these small missteps, rotten, disgusting, and broken creatures are born that shouldn't even exist. Once created, I theorized that they reside in their own subworld, like a lair beneath our realities, trapped and caged. But like any rabid animal, they sometimes find a way out of said cage. Void explained, eyeing Jida. For a good few years now, I've been trying to find the source of these creatures, endlessly searching for the lair that holds them in place. However, it's just been roadblock after roadblock. It doesn't help with the fact that they seem to be getting more antsy per se. Void affirmed, recalling on how there was both a mimic and polychrome beside one another. So, you're trying to figure out how to end it? Where no glitchy monsters can escape into other worlds? Jida asked, thinking she pieced Void's goal together. Right on, my friend. Like any bug or glitch in a video game, it can be patched. It just begs the question on how I can, patch it. Void rambled on as he finished the slice of pizza. I see. But why are you doing this alone? Jida asked, tilting her head to the other side. Because it doesn't run the risk of me failing anyone else. Void returned with a heavy heart. I do this alone so no one else has to face what I do from day to night. It's all in the name of safety for others. The spark finished as he gazed back upon Jida, who eyed him back, lost in thought. Tapping her knees and glancing to the side, Jida thought of something that seemed to almost pop in on instinct. Something that she knew that would start some kind of argument. But she had to ask. Okay, I understand that. And truthfully, I fully respect it. But hear me out. What if, let's just say, what if I were to help you out? Jida asked, raising her head high. Out of the question. Void returned sharply as he sat up straight. About what I expected, but we made a pretty good team earlier. Like, look, I hate to say it, but you kinda almost died, if you ask me. I really think you could use a nuh-uh. Void returned as he slowly stood back to his feet. What do you mean, nuh-uh? Jida snapped back before she stood herself. Like I said, I don't want to run the risk of someone else getting hurt, or worse, killed. Void replied as he gazed upon Jida with worried eyes. But I'm not a normal someone, Void. I can help you with this. I'm capable for this kind of fight. Jida argued back while Void simply shook his head. Jida, look, I'm sure you can defend yourself. But this journey of mine, it's something I need to do on my own. I can't risk anyone else dying. Approaching the musician, Void placed his mechanical palm upon her shoulder, giving a dead serious stare. Look, I know we've only known each other for a few hours, but in that time, I've come to see that you are the first person in many years that hasn't run away from me. You helped me, and I will forever be grateful for that. But your fight belongs here. This city needs you. It needs its protector. Void stated, now seeing the gears turn within Jida's mind. And what city will there be to protect if you don't succeed? Jida countered with a set of words that Void took in hard. You also saved my life, as well as Nox. Scratch that. You defended my city more than I had done in the past year. If these things still pose a threat to my home that I love dear, then I want to do everything I can to make sure they don't come back. Void, let me help you stop this. Looking down, Void found himself lost in thought. As much as he was against it, Jida did have a valid argument. What if he did fail? With no one watching his back, things could get messy real quick. But with that came another question. Was he ready to embrace another bond after all this time? It was then the spark felt his own shoulder get gently held. Looking back up, he found Jida to be looking down upon him with the expression of both hope and gratitude. In band class, well, before I dropped out, I was taught that working together makes music sound better and more aligned. Maybe the same goes for partnership too. Both Void's and Jida's hearts began to beat in somewhat unison as they looked at each other, evaluating, judging, and understanding both ends. You don't have to do this alone. A long moment passed between the two of them. The cold city air brushed between them as the distant sounds of city life reverberated below. Jida's hair blew in the wind, as well as Void's hoodie. At the same time, their orange and blue glints of color shined off the golden city in the far-off distance. It was then, after a long decision, Void stepped back and sighed with a hand slowly outstretched. Okay, he quietly said, slightly shaking at his own decision. Smiling, Jida reached out and gripped Void's. Then, they shook on it. Don't make me regret this, Void asked as he gazed upon Jida with worried eyes. I'll follow your every word and lead, Blue Eyes. I promise. Jida replied as they both then looked out over the city once more. Its golden hues glimmered back towards them in a shimmering wave, making them both wonder what would happen upon the road ahead. You also have pretty eyes, by the way, Jida complimented from out of left field. What? Void asked, looking towards her, being taken aback. Huh? What? Jida replied, glancing between the spark and the city, all the while feeling a sense of awkwardness growing in her heart. After a short moment, Void simply smiled and then gently chuckled as he gazed back forward as well. Thanks, he said, leaving Jida to turn and bashfully smile away from the spark.